Good morning, Year 8, and welcome to your next lesson on how technology changes over time. Today we're going to be focusing on the Roman period. Remember that for today's lesson you'll need this video and you'll need to be using it to complete your assignments on Microsoft Teams. So as you're watching this video, make sure you're writing your answers on your assignment, and at the end, please make sure you are submitting it and handing it in to your teachers. Okay, so let's start straight away. Your do now is what factors have contributed to changes in technology. So I'm looking at the kind of key factors over time that have changed technology. And then I would like you to tell me what technology initially introduced by the Romans do we still use today. So think about what technology we use today that the Romans gave us. So go to your assignments. I'll give you 5 minutes to complete that task. Okay, so the factors that we've looked at so far are war, economics, and individuals. And all of these three can say that they contributed towards changes in technology. Technology introduced by the Romans that we still use today, there are numerous different types. You could even start with the calendar. The calendar was invented by the Romans to track the different days of the year. You could talk about roads, talk about bathhouses, swimming pools today, aqueducts the Romans introduced, which is bringing water from its source to the people via engineering, and we have that today. And the modern version of that is us having taps in our houses. The Romans introduced so many different things that contribute to today's society, but we're looking at what it actually was that the Romans introduced. So the task is going to involve using this table, and the table looks like this, and it is in your assignments. At each different part, we're going to look at a different section. I'm going to be investigating how technology changed during the Roman period. But to do this, we also have to look at what life was like before, and then we need to compare it to what it's like when the Romans arrived. So at different times, I will tell you which column to be filling in at a time. So we're going to start here. So we're going to read the information. The information is available on Teams. It's also going to be available on the screen. And you are going to fill in the information about what life was like before the Romans in terms of transport, buildings, settlement, where they got their water from, and finally their military. So let's have a look at what life was like before the Romans. So before the Romans conquered Britain, it was not a unified country, but it was separated into small areas controlled by different tribes. Although each tribe had a name, we refer to all pre-Roman people by the name the Romans gave them, which is the Celts. Before the Roman invasion of Britain, almost everyone farmed the land. Communities were spread out in farming villages, although there were large settlement hill forts like this one, which is called Maiden Castle in Dorset. There's another example of a hill fort created by the Romans. So have a think about which section you can start filling in already. Pause the video there if you need to, otherwise we'll continue. So I want you to use the image now, and I want you to tell me all the different types of technology that are being used. So focus on the settlements, focus on the building, and focus on the transport. What technology can you see in this picture? I'm going to pause here for just about 3 minutes while you fill in your table. Okay. So we can continue to fill in information about technology, in particular where they got their water from and their military. If there was a war, the farmers would find the deadliest tool, an axe or a sword, if they were wealthy and became warriors. So a lot of fighters didn't actually have real weapons, they had their farm equipment. The walls of a roundhouse were built using wattle and daub, which is a woven pieces of wood covered in a mixture of mud and straw. And water was fetched from streams and springs in buckets. Although wells existed, there was no plumbing or large-scale infrastructure. Therefore, water could be dangerous. Washing was done in a bucket or a stream. There were no toilets and definitely no sewers. So just going back to this soldier, this is not a professional soldier. He's a farmer that takes on, when he's needed, he might go and fight for the local landowner. But he is not a professional soldier. He is not a professional soldier is someone who the only job they have is to fight, whereas this man is a farmer. So we're going to now look at the Romanization, and you can start to look at the differences between these images and start filling in your second part, but that's the one we're going to look into now. So the second part is we are going to complete column number 2 on the Romans. So we need to look out for these types of technologies: transport, building, settlements, water, and military. And you need to fill in the table in as much detail as possible. Please do not start on the last column. That is going to be a task for later. So we're just looking at column 2 now. So the Roman invasion was led by Emperor Claudius. Okay, this larger-than-life bronze head of Claudius was found in Colchester, a Roman town which was destroyed by rebel Celts, led by Boudicca of the Iceni tribe. This was probably buried at that time. But the Romans successfully invaded Britain in 43 AD. It was actually the 4th attempt for the Romans to invade Britain. Caesar had arrived briefly but then returned. In 43 AD, the Emperor Claudius needed to build his military reputation, and he chose Britain as his target. So why did Claudius want to come into Britain? Because he wanted to build a reputation. He wanted to look good. He wanted people to remember him as a great warrior. It was successful because of improved military technology. So here's the technology section. They used catapults and ballistae and a troop of elephant initially. He also invested more resources and planning into the invasion. It was incredibly well organised, the army, and that was supported by the money that the empire had. And that at the time the empire stretched from Europe all the way to North Africa and the Middle East. Over time, Rome conquered most of modern-day England, Wales, and Scotland. Okay, so you can go back and pause. You can pause here if you want to. Otherwise, we're going to keep going. So we're going to keep looking at the military. So by the 1st century AD, when the Romans successfully invaded Britain, the military technology was advanced thanks to 6 centuries of warfare. So the Romans, when they arrived in Britain, were far more superior than the Celts who lived here. They had a professional army rather than farmers, so the soldiers were paid purely to be soldiers. They were not farmers. It was possible because there was plenty of money at the time to pay them. It was actually built, the empire was built by the first Roman army. Wherever they went, they would build and fight. Roads, bridges, and camps were all built in order to move the Roman war machine. So the Romans not only had a large army, but that army, when it moved through new land, would build roads, it would build bridges, and it would build camps to make sure that the army could move faster. That's one of the big advances in technology, is road technology. The Romans built roads so the Roman army could move faster and easier. The army was full of skilled craftsmen and traders who made their living working for the soldiers, all of them supported by local farms, supplying grain, meat, leather, wool, beer, and even other essentials. And it meant that these military camps would become towns and even cities. So wherever the Roman Empire or the army went, they left behind jobs, they left behind settlements. So pause there if you want to keep writing. Let's have a look a little bit more at Roman army camps. So we still have evidence of Roman army camps today. The Diva Victrix camp gradually attracted settlers and it grew into a town, and that's now called Chester. So the name Chester comes from the Roman name for camp, which is Castra. When the army moved on, the politicians took over. Iron Age tribal centres were redesigned as Roman towns in street grids. So today, lots of cities are still built in street grids, a lot like New York. They had forums, basilicas, temples, theatres, bathhouses, amphitheatres, specialised shops and hotels. Life was peaceful and people lived without fear of invasion because of how well defended the cities were. Transport, here's a big one, and the most substantial thing is that the Romans built a network of roads that connected the whole of Britain. So if you were travelling from London up to Hadrian's Wall, you could follow the roads all the way there, and you could march in a very easy fashion instead of having to cut cross country. The first roads were built by the army because it allowed them to move quickly throughout the empire. That meant that they were wide and they were built to last. The Old Kent Road and Edgware Road are on top of one of the first Roman roads, and that's why it's so straight and that's why it's so wide as well. In towns and city, roads prevented them from becoming muddy, filthy tracks that the Celts used. They also kept pedestrians separate from animals, carts, and occasionally carriages. So the Roman road was created a lot like a modern road is, with different layers of hard material to make sure that they are lasting. And you can still see Roman roads in Italy where modern cars now drive on those roads, and you can still see where all the carts kind of have been going for years because the carts have cut into the stone. One of the big Roman settlements is London, or Londinium. London was built where the river was narrow enough for a bridge and deep enough for ships, perfect for a port. So London is very deep, the River Thames was very deep, but also it had a large bridge. And London Bridge has actually been built in exactly the same place for the last 2,000 years. So if you go to London Bridge, some form of bridge has been sitting on that site for the last 2,000 years. It was built in a grid system with a forum at the centre, and the buildings were unlike anything the Celts had seen before. So let's have a quick look at the buildings. They're very different building materials and construction techniques. They used marble and bricks and even concrete. That meant that they could build higher houses and they were obviously easier to defend. Big towns like St Albans and Cirencester soon had 50 or more grand houses and dozens of villas. Fresh water was brought into the settlements using aqueducts. The floor was heated by underfloor heating systems where hot air is pumped around. Cranes would also be used to help lift materials. So pause the video there to get that completed. Water is another big one. Water is essential for living, and the Romans built these huge aqueducts to allow water to travel from its source to towns and cities. So this is kind of what we'd see as modern day piping. So pause the video there to get something finished about water. A little bit more on water. The water which was brought to settlements by the aqueducts was used in many different ways, which we recognise from our daily lives. Romans had running water in homes, public fountains, public and private baths, and private and public toilets connected to sewers. This sort of ingenuity was not seen again until the Victorian era. So pause the video there just to finish off your writing on water. So some Roman towns also had large baths. Okay, so the town Bath in England, or the city Bath in England, is actually a historic town where there are still Roman baths, and that's what the Romans like to do. So we can pause the video there to write something about Bath. And that brings us on to our final part of this task, part 3. So now you've completed both columns, I'd like you to make a judgment. How has each part of technology changed? So fill in that last box for me. I'll give you 10 minutes to do it, and I'll see you at the end of that 10 minutes. Okay, so there is space at the bottom for extra ideas, and I want you to take this time to add anything else that you could add. So you can use some of these websites to help you. So I'll just pause the video there if you want to spend 5 minutes, add anything else, any other form of technology that you have seen. Okay, so task 2. Using what we've learnt today, I want you to tell me what was the role of individuals, what was the role of economics, and what was the role of war. What was life like at the end of the era? Was it better or was it worse? So I'm going to leave you for 10 minutes to get that task completed before we go on to our final task. So you need to tell me, what was the role for individuals? What was the role for economics? What was the role of war? Let's get that done. Okay, so an example would be Emperor Claudius. Without his invasion, no Roman technology would have been introduced to Britain. That's definitely important. Economics. Uh, Rome was one of the wealthiest empires in the world, which meant they could pump huge amounts of money into paying a professional army to keep them expanding. That would be another factor. And finally, war. Without the Roman army, the Romans would not have been able to invade Britain in the way that they did. Okay, final task then. So your final task is, in the Roman era, which factor had the biggest impact on the change in technology? Was it individuals, economics, or war? Use the sentence starters to help you write this. It should take you 10 minutes. I'm looking for at least 2 paragraphs. Give it a go and I'll see you at the end. Okay, boys, thank you all for your hard work today. Please make sure that you have completed all your work, and then you make sure you hand it in to your teacher once you have completed it. I'll see you next week as we move on to our next period. All right, boys. Thank you very much. Have a good week.